I'm going to stop speaking and hand the virtual floor to Matthew. Welcome, Matthew. It's all
Thank
yours.
you, Karen. Thanks everyone for joining. Really excited to be here today to be partnered with Care and Support West to talk more about staff shortages, how to recruit from abroad. As I say, we've got, as Karen's introduced, we've also got Tom Craig from St. Philip and James on the line. We're going to spend some time shortly hearing about Tom's experience with sponsorship, with recruitment. As Karen mentions, do please put questions in the chat. We'd love this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have any questions at all, just put them in the chat. Also, if you could share your experience with sponsorship as well, that helps us calibrate the presentation. So if you're just getting started, you have zero experience, or if on the other end of the spectrum, you've already had experience with sponsorship, that's really helpful. I can skip or cover off some of the other materials in a bit more quickly. So without further ado, let me get started, move on to the next slide. So we'll just in terms of the agenda for today, we're going to talk a little bit about the workshop series that we have designed, a partnership between Borderless, Care and Support West and some other county councils. I'll talk to you a little bit more about what that entails. Essentially, it's a 6-month webinar series starting next month. Really hope many of you will be able to attend that. We'll talk through Tom's experience at St. Philip's. He's going to share more about his specific situation. And then in the middle part of the presentation, I'm going to talk more about the case for sponsorship and why we think it's important that providers think actively about sponsorship and consider getting a sponsor license, given the changing dynamics in the UK workforce landscape. We'll also talk through a few common myths and perceptions that people have around sponsorship, what it is and what it isn't. I'll mention the grant funding that's available. That expires in March next year, so there's a few months left to claim that grant funding. Middle part of the presentation, we'll talk through the actual mechanics of sponsorship. I won't go into this in a great deal of detail, but we'll talk through the high-level items, and there'll be a lot more information on the slides that I can send you afterwards. At the end, we'll talk more about Borderless, what we can do to help, and I'll show you also a quick demo of the platform. Try to do that in an interactive way, so do please put questions in the chat, and as Karen mentioned, we'll have time for questions and answers as we go. So just to talk more about the webinar series that we'll be delivering from February, from next month onwards. So Borderless has partnered with Care and Support West and also South Gloucestershire County Council, Bristol County Council and North Somerset Council. And what we're going to be doing is actually delivering a series of 6 webinars. They're webinars, but they're also in-person events as well. So they'll both be hybrid in these 2 locations. Again, I'll share all the details after the presentation. They start at 9 AM. It'll be about an hour and a half, 2 hours, once a month for the next 6 months. The key themes for these series is all about ethical international recruitment, the sponsorship process itself, and a big component of it is all about modern slavery and how many of you have probably you've seen BBC News articles. Some of you might have seen the Panorama documentary before Christmas. We'll focus a lot on aspects of modern slavery, how it's changing the landscape, how to spot the signs of it, and I'll actually just show you in a moment the agenda for each of these things. The other key thing I want to get across here is that the sessions are going to be very interactive. So we'll have provider experiences, there'll be interactive polls, we'll probably do a breakout session, time for discussion, so you'll be able to talk with other people in the room about the challenges that they're facing and then play that back when we come back together again at the end of the session. So just to talk about there's 3 themes to these webinar series. The first one is around international recruitment, how to do it well. So we'll cover off some of these materials today. We'll probably go into a bit more detail in this webinar series, but some of the key challenges that providers have, what are the basics, what are the benefits, costs, pitfalls and challenges, and then we'll talk through actually the mechanics of the process, sponsor license, sponsor management systems, certificates of sponsorship, health and care worker visa, the logistics of all the components of international recruitment. 2 dates for you. One is the 19th of February, the second is the 18th of March. The content will be generally quite similar. The provider who joins might be a little bit different, so feel free to just register for whichever of these sessions is most relevant and most convenient for you. Again, I'll share the links afterwards. Second theme will be around your accountability having recruited staff. And we'll talk about this from your perspective, but also from the candidate's perspective as well. So what that means from an internal perspective, but also to your worker. So from your perspective, it's all about staying compliant with recent legislation, especially as that's changing in recent months. In December, obviously, there was a big government update around the sponsorship process. We'll talk about compliance, penalties if you get it wrong, and also best practices in general, what we see across the companies that are using Borderless and how we've actually built technology to help make that a lot easier. Especially to the worker, this is all very human-centered. So how do we deliver an excellent onboarding experience? What does great pastoral support and care look like? Ongoing learning and development and training, and then generally tips for how we can better integrate the sponsor workforce with the domestic workforce. Again, this is split into 2 sessions, one in April, one in May, across 2 different locations, those same 2 locations as before. And the final 2 sessions we're running in June and July are much more around ethical recruitment guidance and modern slavery. So we'll be talking through the actual principles of the code of practice of the ethical recruitment framework. We'll talk about the red list, why that's there, what that means in practice, because I think there's quite a lot of confusion sometimes around what that actually is, what ethical recruitment means, and we'll show you examples of what unethical recruitment is and what ethical recruitment is, just so you have a really clear picture of that, because I think it's a term that gets bandied around a lot and it's not super well understood. The second part of the presentation will also focus on modern slavery. There's been a significant rise in the cases of modern slavery under sponsorship. There's a lot of potential for abuse. So we'll show you some examples of that, what to look out for, what to spot for, how to escalate, and also new approaches that are helping to improve the outlook for modern slavery in the care sector. So that's just a little bit about the webinar series we're running in partnership with Care and Support West and those other county councils. I would now love to hand over to Tom from St. Philip and James to talk more about his experience. I've put some, you can see you've got some things here, but let me pass over to Tom.
Okay, I hope everybody can hear me. We had a very successful piece of work with Borderless last year. We were put into a difficult situation where we had 2 key workers employed via an agency who were their main sponsors. That, as the bullet points show, broke down. And we were put in a very difficult situation where potentially we'd lose both of the workers, and we had to very promptly be able to sponsor ourselves. We're a small care home, 31 bed, and essentially we have a care manager and a business manager. That's me. So that's the sort of management team. And we had no knowledge of sponsorship. So we needed a really good support and advice service, and Borderless provided that. I was particularly pleased that there was a real priority to get one of them sponsored as soon as possible, and that was achieved, much to my delight, within 2 weeks. We did use the more expensive Home Office fast track system, but Borderless were critical in making certain that everything was turned around on our side, and that enabled it to be done in 2 weeks. So the overall result was that we have now been able to secure 3 really good workers using the Borderless software, but also their expert advice through the colleagues working there. And we're now going forward with Borderless, who will be running our compliance from now on. So it was it was a jump into the deep end of the pool, but a very, very successful outcome. Very pleased with the partnership with Borderless. So if anybody would like to ask questions at the end, or in fact contact me outside the meeting, very happy to do that.
Thank you so much, Tom. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, David's got his hand up.
Yeah, just very quickly, Tom. I'm always wanting to, as you know, promote Care and Support West. Can I just say that it was how that, if it's okay with you, that you contacted us to start with?
Yes,
and we put you in touch with Borderless.
Yeah.
That was the key.
That reference was most appreciated, David. Yes, it was good.
Thank you.
Thanks for clarifying, David. Yeah, that's exactly correct. David was able to help speak with Tom to understand the situation, and then referred Tom to us through the partnership we have with them. Thanks very much for sharing experience, Tom. I think that's really powerful. I think as well, it's just an unfortunate situation as well. It's not uncommon, sadly, that candidates are charged a lot of money to come to the UK. 7K is a lot of money. I've heard stories of £20,000 in some cases to come to the UK. Often candidates are forced to spend all the money on certificates which don't have any meaning or value to them in the UK. They're convinced that these things will be necessary to come to the UK. And I think the picture around how the agency and some of these fictitious almost employers treat the staff is pretty shocking. In this case, the staff were being forced to relocate hundreds of miles, and the agency was trying to come after them for additional fees. So it's a big problem in the UK, and it's something that we see Borderless as a way to add a lot of transparency into the mix. And it's something that we hope in time will significantly reduce, because there is a lot of potential, and this does happen, unfortunately, from time to time. Great. Let me move on to the case for sponsorship. Some of you are probably already aware of these issues, but I think there's really three main benefits to sponsorship. The first thing is around the workforce itself. So, as many of you know, nearly 2 years ago, the health and care worker visa was added to the shortage occupation list, and this essentially opened up the care sector to international hiring. That means that you can essentially recruit people from across the world, not just British workers, domestic workers in the UK. And so essentially, with access to that much larger talent pool, you actually then you have a lot more choice, you have a lot more variety. And the stories we hear from all the employers who've sponsored is that, provided you get things right, and it is not straightforward, but it is important to get things right. When you get things right, you actually build a relationship with some great members of staff. Tom mentioned that he's been sponsoring 3 people now, and that experience has been really good for him. So it's essentially a way to help manage staff turnover, reduce staff turnover, and build a much more stable workforce. The second thing is it can actually reduce your costs as well. Depending on your use of agency, depending on how much staff turnover you have, obviously there's a cost to you involved in onboarding new members of staff, offboarding them. There is an additional cost for sponsorship. I'll go into that in a second. But actually, when you stack up the numbers and you think about actually the additional government fee for sponsorship, it actually can be it's actually a fractions of a percent compared to using agency or high staff turnover. And the final thing is it's going to give you a lot of time back. With those benefits around the workforce stabilization and cost reduction, you can actually get back to focusing on the business, delivering excellent care, and making sure that the business is well set up for success going forward. Wanted to touch on a few common myths. I hear numbers, sometimes people tell me, oh, it's £15,000 to get started with international recruitment. I think it's important to break down. Yes, there are different fees along the way, but actually I think a lot of the fees are reducible, and I think a lot of them are mean that the headline number is way cheaper than that. So if you actually think about the mandatory government fees for small sponsors, you're talking about 18, 19, 20p an hour, roughly £30 a month on an ongoing basis. That's for, if you know, the immigration skills charge. It does get charged up front, so you do have to pay the government up front, but it is refundable if someone leaves employment. So we'd like to think about that as approximately £30 a month if, for example, you sponsor someone for 3 years. There is a one-time cost to sign a certificate of sponsorship. I'll talk about that in a second. But again, that's relatively small compared to the length of time someone would stay. There are all sorts of other fees around transport, relocation, but none of those are mandatory. And also there are smart ways to be able to reduce them. So I think the headline is, when you hear a big number related to international recruitment, ask to decompose it, think about what that actually composes, because often the government fees are only a very small, the mandatory amounts of those fees are very small. Another fear, I think, is that workers potentially could leave. We just don't see that happening in practice. So across the board, sponsored workers, generally speaking, stay about 3 times longer than domestic workers or British workers. And as I mentioned before, a lot of fear, I think, sometimes is that if you are sponsoring someone, you are making a very long-term commitment to that person. Yes, you are their sponsor. Yes, you are officially tied to them through the government process. However, normal UK employment law applies. So if it's not quite the right fit, then you are not tied in any more way. Obviously, you should do these things. This person's immigration status is tied to you as an employer. However, there are other opportunities for those sponsored workers in the UK. So it doesn't actually mean that you must employ them for that full length of time. You have the same level of flexibility you have with the domestic workforce. I think another thing is on how much extra support sponsor workers are going to need. Bear in mind, you can also sponsor people in the UK with a sponsor license, not just overseas. And I think, yes, of course, if you're moving country, then it is a new experience, and therefore the employer does need to think about, and we help them support with the pastoral side of things as well. But I would say that simple things like supporting with accommodation, getting a welcome well set up, getting the right foundations right at the beginning do go a very long way to making sure that people have a good experience and they're happy and fulfilled in their new role. I'll talk briefly about the grant funding. You're probably aware of this. I think it was April last year, or perhaps even earlier, maybe even more than a year ago now, the government launched an international recruitment fund of £15 million to help care providers, the adult social care sector, with international recruitment. It was done in a devolved way. So each region of the UK had different pots. South East, for example, had 2.5 million. Each region of the UK got a number somewhere between 1.5 and 2.5 million, I think. And then it was up to those regions how to further distribute them. Generally speaking, most of the regions have said that they're very flexible with how you can use the funds, so they can be used to cover government fees, third-party fees, other costs related to sponsorship. And generally, the criteria is you must be a CQC registered provider above inadequate, and you must incur a sponsorship expense between April last year and March this year. Let us know if you need the link to your local association. It's every part of the UK is doing something slightly different. In general, though, this funding is first come, first served, so don't wait to claim it. Once those pots have been exhausted, that will be it. Great. I want to give a little overview of the sponsorship process itself. So there's two components to this. One is an upfront process around getting your sponsor license. That's what we helped Tom with in a very short space of time. And then the ongoing piece is around the sponsor management system, issuing COS, applying for visas, and managing your ongoing responsibilities. So the process of actually getting your sponsor license is, what is a sponsor license? It's a license you need to sponsor workers. It's valid for 4 years. And with that license, you can sponsor as many people as you need. So remember, this is just a one-time process. You don't do this every time you sponsor an individual. There is a separate process for that. You need information on the company, the roles that you would like to sponsor for. You need to write a cover letter to the Home Office detailing why you would like to sponsor and why you are well set up to be able to support workers. And you also need supporting documentation. What you provide really varies depending on your circumstances. The license can be granted very quickly if you pay a government priority fee. Otherwise, the government, unfortunately, are not particularly well staffed, and they will take about 12 weeks to reply with your sponsor license. In general, what we're seeing across sponsor license applications at the moment is a lot more emphasis on documentation. Burden of proof has gone up significantly since the record net migration number announced at the end of last year, and obviously the government changes as a result of that. So there's definitely a lot more requirement to get everything in line. You can apply directly on the government website, or you can use Borderless. Just head over to sponsorlicense.org, and there's a 4-step process to make that nice and efficient and simple, and also a lot more cost effective as well. Okay, so that's the sponsor license process. Your sponsor license will come back once the government's approved it, and you are now legally entitled to sponsor workers in the UK who need sponsorship, who don't have a British passport, or anyone from across the world. With your ongoing responsibility is then handled through this sponsor management system. It's this lovely looking system. I've taken a screenshot on the right hand side. Unfortunately, it has not been updated in a while. It's the key portal that you will use to manage all things related to sponsorship with the government. So via this portal, you can issue certificates of sponsorships. You can request new sponsorship certificates, which is a process that's recently become very bureaucratic. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. You also have an ongoing compliance responsibility to the Home Office. So you use this system to update users and update workers, and you also use it to manage the individuals within your company who has access to the system. Various individuals can access it. The authorizing officer is the person who's generally overall responsible for sponsorship. The key contact is the person that manages Home Office communications, and you've got other level 1 and level 2 users. With the Borderless platform, you actually integrate with your SMS system, and so we manage most of these responsibilities for you, which means you don't really need to touch this system. We will take care of the management of it on your behalf. So, okay, now you've got access to this system, and now say you would like to sponsor a worker. So what do you need? You need to issue a certificate of sponsorship. This is a document which the government generates when you perform actions in the SMS system. What does it cost? £239 to assign a certificate, and you must use that certificate within 3 months of generating it. You specify how long you are going to be sponsoring someone for when you generate it. So you would say, I would like to sponsor someone for 3 years or for 5 years. And there are two different types. One is undefined, very helpful terminology, undefined for in the UK, defined for overseas. And a worker cannot get their visa without their certificate of sponsorship. You need to add details on the worker, the passport details, addresses, job codes, etc. All of that goes on there. And again, through the integration we have with the SMS system, we actually do this all automatically. So you just take your actions, you tell us who you'd like to sponsor, you add their information on Borderless, and we will handle this process for you. So you won't need to worry about it. The next step would be to apply for a visa. The visa was introduced as a special visa for the care sector in general to help address some of these shortages. It basically is a subset of the skilled worker visa, and that just means the government theoretically give you faster processing times and some reduced fees for the visa itself. It's a bit cheaper than the skilled worker visa. Key things you need to be aware of here is the responsibilities must match the job that the person's going to perform. There is a list of jobs in the UK, and each visa is assigned an occupational code, and that job, the person's work must match that. So, for example, you couldn't sponsor a chef as a care worker. The chef has their own occupational code. Minimum earnings, you need to be aware that people must earn at least £20,960, which is £10.75 an hour at 38 hours a week. You can't pay less than that £10.75 an hour, but it is fine to have someone work more than that, because then their minimum earnings will be above the £20,960 over across the year. Documents you need for the visa vary, but essentially it's a combination of passports, obviously the certificate of sponsorship, and then depending on the country someone's in, it will be a combination of and their experience. It will be a combination of English language proof, savings, proof of relationships, health checks, and various police checks as well. How much does it cost? £284 or £551. You as an employer are not mandated to. The government don't require you to pay for the visa. Some employers choose to do that. Some, however, the candidates pay for the visa. So it's up to you. Generally speaking, processing times really varies. It depends a bit on Home Office capacity. It can be anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks for a standard visa, sometimes a little bit quicker. You can get a priority visa back within a week and 1 day if you really need it. Again, we submit through the Borderless platform visa applications on behalf of employers and candidates. That's through the integration we have with UKVI. So you don't need to worry about this yourself, and you also don't need to have the candidate do this visa processing as well. We'll take care of that for them. I'd like to touch briefly on the compliance aspects. You need to report changes to your license details. So individuals who are changing within your company, if your corporate structure is changing, if you have multiple sites, you will need to report to the Home Office about that. This is really so the Home Office understand your structure, and therefore whether or not there's going to be potential ways in which they wouldn't have visibility on workers who you're sponsoring. That makes sense. So the Home Office need this kind of visibility. You also need to tell the Home Office, because you are the sponsoring employer, you need to tell the Home Office when things are changing, because you're employing someone whose immigration status needs to be visible to the Home Office, and you have to make these changes within 10 working days. So things like absence, extended absences, changes to job salaries, certainly if the person is doing a different job, and certainly if someone leaves employment. You obviously have an ongoing duty to keep records around your recruitment processes, right to work checks, monitor expiry dates, and addresses. I'm sure you're doing a lot of these things already, but the Home Office adds an additional layer on top of this. You need to stay compliant with immigration rules and making sure workers are maintaining compliance as well. And I'll show you in a second how the Borderless system helps with all the compliance aspects of this too. Very quick summary of what Borderless is. Essentially, we are a technology platform plus a full team of expert individuals within the company, which can manage the whole process of hiring, sponsorship, and compliance for you. So we have a service that helps you get sponsor license in a fast and efficient way. And then on an ongoing basis, we can support with recruitment, immigration, relocation, compliance, and pastoral support. Think about Borderless as your recruiter, your immigration expert, your employment and HR expert, all wrapped into one. And some of the key benefits you'll see in a second when I show you the platform is a lot of that transparency and automation that we've built in. Why are people increasingly switching to Borderless? Well, we're just making the whole process a lot more efficient, so we can speed up many of those manual processes, especially around immigration and recruitment. In doing so, we're able to pass those cost savings on to you, so a lot cheaper than traditional solutions. If you might go to a traditional recruiter, you're going to get quotes for thousands of pounds for overseas recruitment. We don't think it needs to be anything like those kind of numbers. As I mentioned before, everything's built into the system. We've designed it in a really easy to use way, so you can see exactly at any point in time what's going on, and we automate all of those key tasks, so you don't need to do them. And because of this, we can just do the processing very accurately, efficiently, and with a high degree of confidence. As I mentioned before, we're partnered with many of the care associations across the UK and fully licensed and regulated with all the various bodies. So we're on the NHS ethical recruitment list, regulated by the Office of the Immigration Services Commission, and as a tech platform fully compliant with GDPR legislation. That's all built into the system. I'm going to switch over now to the system itself, and I'll do a little bit of a quick overview of how things work. So I guess the first thing to say is the system is very flexible. You don't need to use the system end to end. You could just, for example, use it for compliance, or you could just use it for visa processing. I'll talk you through the high level of how many employers do use the system, so you can actually use it for your recruitment. The recruitment works in two ways. Either you can integrate a link on your website, or actually anywhere you'd like to use that link, and that can mean that candidates can then directly apply to you. Or if you already have someone in mind, like Tom did, around who they'd like to sponsor, you just land on your homepage, you press the sponsor button, and then you just put the name of the email address of the individual you'd like to sponsor. You tell us details around what your action would actually like to happen here, so your care assistant. And then, as you can see here, the system is not allowing you to proceed because, for example, this number of hours and rate would not be compliant with the visa. So you'd have to offer at least 38 hours a week for this candidate to proceed. So a lot of those checks are all built into the system, so you can't really make mistakes. From that perspective, that point in time, that goes on to the immigration part of the system. Let me just show you the general recruitment capabilities. So I'll show you another employer here who's using the Borderless system. This is a 600-person supported living company down in the southeast. What they've done is they've integrated a link to Borderless. So this is international candidates, but also candidates in the UK who need sponsorship. Any of those candidates requiring sponsorship can now apply to this company's called LDC Care via the Borderless system. And so candidates find those links, and they are now then applying to LDC via the Borderless technology system. These links can be put anywhere you like, so you can put them on Indeed, Facebook, anywhere you're recruiting. If you're getting lots of emails and phone calls, you could direct candidates to these links. The great benefit of that is that Borderless is able to do all the vetting, the verification, and the document checking, experience checking for you. So, for example, say you're getting 100 applications a month, you can actually just send those applications to Borderless. And what we're going to do behind the scenes is all of that vetting and verification. So when you come into the system, you can actually see the candidate who's been Borderless verified. What does that mean? We've done, for example, identity checks. Does their passport match their face? The candidate's gone through that process. Does the candidate have all the right documents? And this is particularly tied to the immigration system. It means that when you sponsor an individual, all of those checks are performed in advance. So therefore, when you move to immigration, all the documents are at hand, they're all ready to go, and therefore the immigration processing part of the system is going to be fast and efficient. You can always come in and see these documents that we verified. These are just demo candidates, so obviously just example documents. You can come in here and see the previous experience of workers. You can see their reference information, reference letters that have been provided, and you can obviously see links to their CVs as well. Many candidates also upload a video. So this is great if you, for example, are recruiting from overseas, someone's passed the English language test, that's great. That means they're going to get the visa, but you'd actually like to see them speaking English and to see what that means in practice. So there's a little button for many candidates you can press to watch the video before you would actually decide to interview someone. You can come in here and actually interview someone. Again, this speeds up the process of going back and forward. This is actually you proposing an interview directly to the candidate. So just say, I'd like to interview you, for example, next week, 11 a.m. And then once the candidate accepts that, that's going to get booked in with you straight away. No back and forth required. As I mentioned before, you can make the offer through the system too. We can integrate your job letters, and these can all be electronically signed through the system. So it makes that process faster as well. Lots and lots more capabilities in here. I won't dwell on it, but lots and lots of ability to filter candidates based on your preferences. So for example, say you're a dom care provider, you can actually say, okay, great, I'm looking for people who have an automatic or manual driving license. If you're looking for people who require accommodation support, lots in here that can make it easier for you to find relevant candidates. The middle part of the system is all around immigration processing. This is where Borderless is going to handle all the SMS part of the system for you. It's going to assign certificates of sponsorships, and it's going to submit visas, all detailed here. The main takeaway is that you don't need to really do anything at this point. The Borderless system is just keeping you up to date with what's going on with your various candidates. You can just come in at any point in time, see where they are, and also see what stages are remaining in the immigration journey. I'll touch quickly on the compliance aspect. So you can come in here, you can actually add all of your existing employees in here. So let's have a look at current employees, and you can see, for example, you can monitor visa expiry dates, and you can also add and store all the information around the candidates as well. So you can add their personal details, DBS checks, change of circumstances, all on the system. If things need to change with the Home Office, if someone leaves employment, you can just come in here. Because we're connected to the SMS system, we can actually then report those back for you. So you don't need to manage the SMS system, you can do everything. If, for example, you're sponsoring someone for just 1 year and their visa's coming up for renewal, just press the sponsor button, and then you can actually say, okay, great, I'd like to re-extend sponsorship for another 3 years, and that will go through the same process again. I want to touch on something we launched December last year, so last month, and this is helping employers with the burdens of COSs. As many of you might be experiencing, the process for getting your certificates of sponsorship has now suddenly become a lot more complicated. What we've done here is actually detail all the information you're going to need in order to get your additional certificates of sponsorship. You can upload them to the Borderless system, and we're actually going to be vetting and verifying those documents for you, such that when you're ready to actually then renew your certificates of sponsorship, you can also do that through the system too. You can actually make the requests through Borderless. Quite sure why this isn't working. This is not connected to an SMS system. But essentially in this page, you can just add your request, and we'll essentially manage the process back and forward for you with the Home Office, which will save you the pain of getting lengthy emails from them asking for yet more documents. So that's a very whistle-stop tour of the system. If you'd like to get started, then just scan this QR code or hit this link, and we can arrange a time to speak to see whether this is something which potentially can help. I've been speaking for a very long time. I'd love to stop speaking and take questions from the floor. So I hope that was helpful.
That was amazing, Matthew. From having experience of recruiting overseas a long time ago myself, and I know how difficult it can be, that makes it so much easier. Goodness me. There are a couple of questions in the chat. I think you clarified the first one. Can you clarify the sponsor license cost, please? I think you've done that already.
Yep, no problem. Let me just go back to that slide. So cost for a sponsor license is, yes, it can sound a little bit confusing. If you get, the easiest way to see this is actually just go onto sponsorlicense.org, and we've detailed all the costs on the website. But essentially what it is it's 2 fees. One is a government fee, and then there's also, now the government fee is either £536 for small organisations, and I'll explain what that means in a second, or it's £1,476 for large organisations. That's just the government fee, the government sponsor licence application fee. Generally speaking, most care providers are small organisations. So large organisations, they need to satisfy assets, something like £10.2 million in revenue, £5.1 million in assets, and they must employ more than 50 workers. There's 2 out of the 3 criteria. If you satisfy them, you are classed as a small employer. Generally speaking, some of the small care providers, they do have more than 50 employees, but their assets and turnover are not above those levels, so they fall into the small bucket. Big care home operators are, however, large sponsors, so there's an additional fee. And they also pay a slightly higher immigration skills charge every year as well. Again, not crazy. That £30 a month becomes about £80 a month. But 95% of care companies are small organisations. Tom mentioned he used the government priority service. So the government asked for an additional £500 in order to get your sponsor licence. That's just to put you at the top of the queue. So there's an additional government fee. And then Borderless, we charge a fee which starts at, it's generally around $7.95. We think that's pretty much the best price you're going to find. I think if you go and ask a lawyer to help you with your sponsor license, you'll get a quote generally £3,000, sometimes £5,000, sometimes a little bit cheaper. We don't think it should be so expensive for getting started, so we charge a fee of $7.95, slightly higher for a priority fee. That's clear. And then just to reiterate, that is a one-time fee. You pay that for your company, your organization, and then your license is good for 4 years. Whether you recruit one person or 100 people, you don't pay that fee again.
Okay. Staying with the topic of fees, there's a couple of questions. One is, we are sponsors already. What are the fees if we want you to do the vetting process?
Yep, so we've kept our fees as low as we possibly can. Essentially, we charge a small monthly fee for ongoing access to the platform. That's generally if you're looking to use Borderless for the recruitment capabilities and the compliance capabilities. So that's all the automatic vetting, verification. It doesn't matter, again, whether it's 10 people applying or 1,000 people applying a week. The system can support that. You'll get access to that dashboard, all that filtering and document checking, which should make your life, if you're looking through many, many applications, a lot easier. Pricing starts from £99 a month. On that point, generally speaking, smaller companies is around that level. And we also charge a fee to sponsor an individual, and that is generally $5.99 per person. And think about that as an end-to-end fee. There's no additional fees for recruitment or and for that $5.99, essentially we're doing all the immigration process too. So you don't need to involve any other parties to the process.
Okay, so you're answering the last question. Simon's asking, so boiling it all down to basics, what's the typical cost per recruitment? But that would be within that figure you've just quoted, wouldn't it? Yeah.
Yep,
okay,
exactly.
There's a question I realise there's a couple of hands up, but there's another question. How do you get the COS letter? When I sponsored 7 of our current staff, I didn't get this.
How do you get the COS letter when I sponsor 7? I'm not quite sure exactly what the question means, Natasha. If you're referring to the actual certificate of sponsorship, this is something that you can generate from the sponsor. You generate it when you go to assign it in the SMS system, and you can download it off the system. Generally speaking, what happens right now is that employers download that, send it to the worker, and the worker goes away and does a bunch of stuff. With Borderless, we've just made that visible between everyone, so the COS is automatically visible to both yourself and the candidate. I'm not sure if that's what you meant, or if you're talking more about COS renewals. If you can clarify, I can help address that one.
Okay. So we've got 3 hands up. David, you were first. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, just a couple of things, Matt, sorry. I guess that if people chose to do any of the 6 sessions that you talked about earlier on, there'd be a greater level of detail per subject matter, and you wouldn't you wouldn't be rushing it through in order to get all this through in like 45 minutes or something.
Yeah, I've sped up.
Yes, yeah, and a very good speeding it was too.
Absolutely, absolutely.
But clearly, there were lots of things as you went through that people would want to say, oh, hang on a minute, what do you mean by that? So I just wanted to maybe just underline that for people.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, thanks for doing that, David. Yeah.
Booking on the sessions coming forward is going to get you lots and lots more information.
Yep.
And then just the other point from me, I imagine that all the figures you quote from Borderless probably also need to have VAT added to them, do they?
Correct. Yeah. So we're a VAT registered organisation, and I am aware the care sector unfortunately doesn't have quite the right VAT respect with regard to HMRC. So unfortunately, we are obligated to charge VAT. I know some companies can't reclaim some of that. We've been back and forth with the accountants to see if there's anything we can do, but unfortunately not.
Okay, thank you.
Well, most people in care are not VAT regulated, so registered rather. So I just wanted to underline that for people. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. Lucia, you've got your hand up if you'd like to unmute yourself. You're number 2. We've got quite a few questions coming through, Matt. So.
I
No
do.
problem.
Hello, Matt. My name is Lucy. So I think you've clarified on the cost, but I may need more clarification on that. What I really wanted to find, we already sponsor, and but what I want to get away from is for us to do the sponsor duties, where does the system provide that?
Yes, so it depends what you mean by sponsored duties, but for example, if you're reporting on change of circumstances, you would just go over to you'd find the employee in the system and you would report that change via Borderless, and that would get reported back to the SMS system. We also support with the Home Office audits to the extent they come up as well. So depending on the actual duty you're thinking about managing, I can go into more details there, but essentially, yes, it's going to significantly reduce that compliance burden you have vis-a-vis the Home Office.
So for any employees that we currently have that are on sponsorship license, we can easily upload them on your system?
Right. Yeah, I'll just show you how you do that right now, but essentially you just go back to the employees tab, you press on, let's go back here, you just press add, and then you tell us, okay, here we go, this is the employee's first name, email, you let us know a bit about their visa category, when it's due to expire. And then once you've added them to the system, you can then go in and actually provide more documents and upload information around employment, right to work checks, DBS checks. Once the information's on the system, it's always there, and you can actually then manage things accordingly.
So for that full management system, is that the cost that's 500 and something a month?
No, there's no monthly fee of that number.
Oh.
It's generally speaking £99 a month.
Oh, it's £99 a month.
It's only when you actually sponsor someone. It's not. There's no big fee per person per month. It's only a low monthly fee, and then a fee each time you go through the sponsorship process for that individual.
And you provide the sponsorship process, if you see what I mean. We don't have to do it.
We manage the whole process for you, yeah.
Okay. How much does that cost again, sorry?
Yes, it's $599 plus VAT per person. And most of the employers, it's a case of actually just adding individuals to the system. Either you have a direct relationship already, or you find someone from who's directly applied to you. You can also access, I didn't mention this, but there's a pool of about I think it's about 90,000 candidates now, about 2/3 who are abroad, one third who are in the UK, so about 30,000 candidates in the UK, and you have access to that entire pool of individuals as well. Some employers like the fact that they can just come into the system and say, actually, it's not showing up here because this is a demo environment, but you can actually look for people who are within 5 or 10 miles of you in the UK. So actually get quite hyper local if you're not looking to ask someone to relocate from a different part of the country.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, my last question.
Oh, okay.
So we just last one.
There's more people waiting. So, all right. Okay.
Yeah. Last question. So with applying for certificate of sponsorship, whether it's the defined or undefined, does the system support that?
Correct. Yes. Yeah. We take all that for you. You just tell us about you just say, this is the person I'd like to sponsor, regardless of the circumstances. We'll go through and we'll manage that for you. You won't need to get into the nuances of defined, undefined, and different circumstances of individuals. That's all taken care of for you.
Okay, so thank you.
Well,
no problem.
Alina, are you still there? You had your hand up. Do you still have a question? If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi, Matthew, and thank you for your explanation. So I was the same question what Lucia asked. I clarified completely.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, there is, what is the process where candidates have dependents? What are the implications of the new government rules?
Yep. So we actually ran a webinar about this just at the end of last year. As you know, governments responded to the high levels of net migration into the UK with changes to the broader visa landscape across the UK. A big change has been to raise the salary threshold for skilled worker visas. Now, the good news for the care sector is that the health and care worker visa is exempt from those changes, so the salary threshold remains 20,960. It will probably go up a little bit in April with the rises to minimum wage. The other big change that that the government is going to be implementing, we're not sure exactly when. It's been talked about to make it take effect in April. There's been some talk that it might happen a bit sooner than that. Will be the fact that overseas dependents, just care workers and senior care workers, no one else, will not be allowed to bring dependents. Now, the people who are already in the UK on a health and care worker visa, if you're already on the route, you will be allowed to, your dependents will, if you move jobs, the dependent visas will still apply. And also, if you've come into the UK and your dependents are currently abroad and the change happens, you'll still be able to bring those people in. So think about it as anyone after the change takes effect, only those main applicants from abroad will not be able to bring their dependents. Borderless supports with dependent visa processing, so candidates have the option in their portal. So the candidates have a system like this as well. So they log on, they see all the information, there are the documents, they can see what's going on with their applications, and they can actually use Borderless for dependent visa processing as well. What the impact of the government rules are, I think, is really interesting. I think, without going to a long diatribe, I think the main takeaway is that the fact that overseas dependents medium term will not be allowed to come to the UK will place further recruitment challenges on the care sector, but other sectors in the UK as well, right? It's all a very interconnected picture. And so as there's fewer people coming into the UK workforce, that will create a greater recruitment pressure in the care sector, plus other sectors that are connected between them. So I think the outlook is the main individuals will be able to be sponsored by under the 6145, 646. That's not going away. But we do expect like medium term recruitment pressures, probably a year plus out to mount.
Okay, thank you. It's interesting, isn't it? Miriam's got her hand up. She's also asking a question. Miriam, do you wish to ask Matthew?
Yeah, it's just that same question. It's just because I need to bounce, and I just want to make sure that I
that's
try and get an answer before I go. Are you ISO 27001 certified or Cyber Essential certified? Or that's the question.
I'll get our CTO to send you, if you send us an email, but the answer is yes. Some of it's via the technology systems that we use under the hood of the Borderless system. That exactly the hosts, and some of it's directly through us. But yes, to answer your question.
Okay, because if we after listening to you, it's the vetting that we'll be interested in, and it's also part of our quality process to make sure that whoever we engage with in IT's got that. So thank you very much. Quite informative and enlightening. Thank you.
Lucy's asked, has the 6145 been taken away completely?
No, that still exists as an occupational code, and it's still a valid code for the health and care worker visa. So nothing has really changed per se with regard to that. The only change is the fact that 6145 and 6146 can no longer, from whenever the government make this change, April or before, will be allowed to bring independence. So it hasn't been taken away. One thing the government has talked about is changing what's called the shortage occupation list and replacing it with an immigration salary list. This will just revise the codes on that list and also provide greater salary clarity. They've got this, again, without getting into the details, this is discount of 80% of the going rate. This is going to become revamped, but in that revised immigration salary list, 6145 will still remain.
Lovely, thank you. Lena, is that an old hand or have you got another question? I think that might be an old hand.
It is the old one. No.
All right, okay, thank you. Okay, lovely questions. And as David mentioned earlier, if you attend the following sessions that Matthew is going to be delivering, there will be a lot more time and a lot more answers, I'm sure, as questions come about. So, and as Matthew has demonstrated, he knows the product very well, and Borderless can help you immensely. So if we don't have any further questions, I don't believe we have. How do we contact you, Matt?
Yeah, I'll put my details in. You can shoot me an email, Matthew at Borderless. Okay. Will you send around the slides, Helen? Sorry, Karen. Apologies.
Yeah, that's all right. Yes, as I've mentioned, we're recording, so I'm going to stop the recording now. Just
a quick one, Matthew. You mentioned that in the other sessions, the 6 sessions,